Welcome back, Video Creeps. With 6 original entries, 2 to be added, 4 remakes, and 5 spin-offs, and not to mention the unofficial plethora of movies like 3D with Sid Haig and Jeffrey Combs, it goes without saying that the Night of the Living Dead legacy is real. Real beyond comprehension sometimes. But do you know how it got to how it is now? The legal issues, the nasty breakups. We're talking tea, baby. Or even understand the multiple timelines in this massive franchise? Well, fear not. Go ahead and like this video and then sit tight as I teach you everything that you need to know about Night of the Living Dead and the insane monster that is this spaghetti bowl. Now, there's no real solid place to start with this thing, so to make it as simple as possible, the first thing that you're gonna wanna know is this man right here. This is George Romero, an American filmmaker, writer, editor, and just all-around horror icon. But much more important, he is considered the godfather of all zombie films. But I wouldn't be able to sit here without first clarifying a very important distinction. Now, Romero did not create the concept of zombies. He played a major role in modernizing them for a wider audience, for sure, but that's literally just for film. And Romero himself was actually inspired by another man, a man named Richard Matheson. Romero was exposed to a book of Matheson's in 1957, a little something called I Am Legend. You may have heard of it, little book. And Romero lost his shit about it after a friend of his, Richard Ricci, not to be confused with the guy who kidnapped Elizabeth Smart in 2002, not him. Same name, different game. But just to talk about it for a second, when that book came out, it was considered the most terrifying book ever created. But Romero isn't the only person to ever praise this book for being a gigantic, horrific inspiration.
No way. Yes way.
Dean Koontz, Brian Lumley, Dan Simmons, and Stephen King all credit this book as being the foundation on which they built their horror on. Now, there's an archive of interviews with George Romero talking about the intense effect that I Am Legend had on him and his career, so we're not going to dig too deeply into that. But what is important for us to talk about is what the word zombie meant to the world at the time before Romero's zombies. Like I mentioned before, Romero did not create the idea of what a zombie is. In fact, the Greek were the first civilization to ever speak about a fear of the undead rising from their graves. Decades later, archaeologists would unearth many skeletal remains that were being pinned down by rocks and heavy objects, seemingly with the intention to keep the reanimated fucking in there, stay there. Now from this, zombie folklore was born. And a trip to the Caribbean islands in the 17th century is where our knowledge of zombies would pick up, right where the Greeks left off. Where in those Caribbean islands, the word zombie actually referred to West African slaves who were forced to work under brutal work conditions. However, these slaves were undead, and they were brought back to life using voodoo magic, being cast from what's known as a boca. Wait, no, it's a bokor. There's just not a lot of bokors in my life, so beef that. Which, again, not to get overly technical, because I can't. A bokor just means a voodoo witch for hire. And you actually see examples of bokor zombies in Golden Age films, like King of the Zombies and I Walked with a Zombie. But to go even further back to right, just a little bit before, in 1697, an author by the name Linda Troost published a book called The Undead 18th Century, where yet again, zombies are defined completely different, being referred to as ghosts or spirits. No mention of cannibalistic corpses anywhere. So all of this history to say, no, George Romero just did not create the idea of zombies. Sorry, bruh, dunked on you fucking hard. But now the question that needs to be asked is, if George Romero didn't create the idea of zombies, what did he do to earn the reputation of godfathers of the zombies? Enter 1968's Night of the Living Dead. Slow-moving, flesh-eating, rip a kid's arm off at a birthday party. Zombies, baby. Romero showed us zombies for the first time in a way that still represents zombies to this day. Which is curious because the Haitian zombie is not represented in Romero's zombies at all. It truly is closer to the vampires that we see in I Am Legend. This insane horde of zombies coming together, which harkens to a major connection of something going on around the time that this movie came out. Something far bigger than Night of the Living Dead. And that event was the civil rights movement. And whether Romero meant to do this or not, the parallels between the world that he created and the real world at that time are kind of undeniable. Unbeknownst to Romero, he ended up making a film that was mirroring the times in real time. It was an added layer of what was going on the news in our real world. All the way down to subtle cues like him filming the movie in black and white, resembling what we were seeing on the newscast at the time. Now, Romero has said countless times that was never his intention, nor was it his motivation to make that type of commentary. But when you take a look at these comparative shots, it's a little difficult to differentiate. Intentional or not, the times were represented in this film. But even away from the historical properties that are relevant to this film, Romero's zombies also introduced a certain subsector of rules that we had never fucking thought about before. All of a sudden, anybody could become a zombie. He gave them this character trait where there were these slow-moving, ugly creatures. They had intelligence to a certain degree, able to use tools. And there were now rules for how to destroy a zombie, by either inflicting blunt force trauma to the head or just shooting them right through the brains. Needless to say, the film was a gigantic success, spawning 5 sequels. Dawn of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, and Survival of the Dead. And though Romero passed in 2017, unfortunately to cancer, there are 2 more planned films in Romero's zombie universe. One titled Road of the Dead and a prequel called Rise of the Dead, which will dive into the unexplained events of what happened right before Night of the Living Dead. So Romero's legacy will continue. But initially, did George Romero do it alone? Now comes in the second guy that you should probably know. John Russo, an American screenwriter and filmmaker who was a major part of Night of the Living Dead's success. You see, before the glitz and glam, Russo, Romero, and a man named Russell Streiner, who also plays Johnny in Night of the Living Dead, all had a company together called Latent Image, where they just produced commercials for local businesses.
Backpacks, backpacks, come get your backpack.
The 3 friends eventually got to a place of creative fatigue with commercials and decided that they wanted to band their money together in order to make a feature film. And while Romero writing Night of the Living Dead is true, it's not the whole true. You see, it was initially Russo's idea to craft a story about a man who stumbles upon a host of ghouls who are eating human flesh. Romero liked that idea so much that he went back and started writing a script, mashing that up with some of the ideas that he took from I Am Legend to make Night of the Living Dead. But if John Russo's ideas are the catalyst of Night of the Living Dead, why isn't John Russo a household name like Romero? And the truth is, Romero just straight up didn't say shit. Just gladly taking all the fame and glory for himself. Like, I wish that was a joke. Like, I wish that was like me just being silly old Mike. No, that is what happened. I can tell you what went down step by step, but John Russo has been very vocal about this for the last couple years. And he talks a bit about it in this interview with Everlasting Hauntings.
So I was there every step of the way. Without me, that movie wouldn't exist. Not only because it was my idea to make it in the first place, but the main ideas of the main concepts were mine. And I have a book called The Complete Night of the Living Dead Film Book. And I didn't tell the story in detail when I wrote that book. about how the script got done. I didn't want to rain on George's parade.
Now, while this can be considered an internal issue between friends, the movie also had a plethora of external issues as well. And it's all because of one tiny little oversight that left the film open to a major copyright issue. But to understand what happened, we have to first understand the Copyright Act of 1909. It is the single reason why you see this under every film up until the 1970s. It was literally the difference between you owning your shit and you not owning your shit. And it was straight up just something that Night of the Living Dead did not have. To be clear, they did have it at one point. The film did intend to have that copyright, and there initially was a cut that had it on there. However, Image 10, Romero's company, ended up striking a distribution deal with the Walter Reed organization, where they then suggested that they go through a bit of a name change and shift the title over to Night of the Living Dead, since the original title, Night of the Flesh Eaters, was kind of reminiscent to 1964's Flesh Eaters. They obliged and changed the title. However, when they did, they just kind of forgot to put it on. And then no one caught it till it was way too late. It was a tragic and cautionary tale. But in hindsight, since no one technically owned Night of the Living Dead, everybody was able to use that source material. And that's why you see it pop up in so many different movies. You see it show up in TV shows, audio from it is sampled in so many songs. It's not this crazy love for the film, though that does exist, it's cause it's free! It's straight up access, baby! And in that access, the more people use it, the stronger the legacy for this film becomes. You, watching this video right now, you own Night of the Living Dead. Me, right here, sitting here looking pretty. I own that shit. Also, we all own Operation Ivy's full discography. My buddy Rooster taught me that a while back. It's crazy. So, use that too. That has nothing to do with Night of the Living Dead. That's just rad. But now here's where things start to get interesting. Because no one owns the first Night of the Living Dead, changing the title just a little bit meant that anyone could build upon that storyline. And Rousseau, being slighted by Romero, set out to do exactly that, with a little film that we all revere in the horror community called Return of the Living Dead. And much like he did with Night of the Living Dead, Rousseau expanded on the lore more in Return, introducing the ideas that zombies can now run, they can set traps, and they can talk. And more importantly, something that even if you've never seen anything about any of the Living Dead films, if you know of zombies, you know they like brains. Yeah, that's Return of the Living Dead, baby. And not only did we get the whole zombies eat brains thing, we also got an explanation as to why zombies eat brains, informing us that zombies can also feel, and what they feel is pain. All the time, just rotting they can feel the death. And the only thing that satiates that pain, that alleviates that shit, it's brains. Now, while Rousseau would not stay with the Return of the Living Dead franchise throughout all the 4 sequels to come, the franchise did start to go in its own direction with Return of the Living Dead 2, Return of the Living Dead 3, Return of the Living Dead Necropolis, and the last one in the franchise, Return Rave to the Grave. The Return films began to become as popular as the Night of the Living Dead films, as Romero is making his. Yet, over the years, Romero never seemed to give Rousseau the props that he deserved, oftentimes referring to the Return films as just parodies of his films. And on a personal note, with that kind of toxic way that you're talking, these are old friends and shit, it's crazy that you can't really find a whole lot of those two talking shit about each other. And if I had to guess why that is, I would have to guess it's because they can't. Once again, we're gonna dip into the Everlasting Hauntings podcast for this clip.
And including giving him permissions to use things that he needed permission for me to do, like Dawn of the Dead. I had to sign off on a lot of stuff or he would have lost his distribution deal. And then when we did Return of the Living Dead, his partners turned around and tried to take the title away from me. I had to go to New York to testify with Ryan and Hemdell's lawyers, and the MPAA ruled unanimously in my favor.
Now, unfortunately, the vibrant life that is still being breathed into Night of the Living Dead cannot be said for Return of the Living Dead. After the massive disappointment that was raved to the grave, producers actually set out to just sell off the rights on eBay. Which, don't get me wrong, is an amazing play for sparking interest back into this franchise, but terribly embarrassing for the state of the series. Because it effectively says that no studio is even going to touch this thing. The only way that we're getting rid of this is an online market auction. Have at it. It seems pretty quiet on the front for a new Return of the Living Dead. Though some, enthusiastic fans have been trying to get a remake of Return of the Living Dead done for years, but God, I don't want to shit on their excitement. I mean, miracles can happen, right? I don't want to be that guy. But shit, like an actual theatrical, well done remake for Return of the Living Dead, I would be down for. Fucking Night of the Living Dead has so many, they have 4 remakes. Which, speaking of, it's worth noting that the Tom Savini remake of Night of the Living Dead actually brings back Russell Streiner and John Rousseau. And in many circles, it's regarded as even a more entertaining film than the original. But that's because Savini's a hero. In the time since Night of the Living Dead's conception, there have been multiple spin-offs and parody films, and the world of the Living Dead will continue on into the future. In fact, as we speak, there's even a newer film that's coming out called Twilight of the Living Dead, directly from the Romero estate, where George Romero's wife is seeking meetings and meeting with writers and shit. Now, I realize that I didn't go over the Brian Peck stuff, and that wasn't without reason. When talking about the legacy of Night of the Living Dead, or just the Living Dead franchise as a community, I didn't want to talk about the Brian Peck stuff. However, if you are interested on that, my buddy Kenny over at Channel of the Living Dead actually covers that beautifully. So if you want to check out his video, please go check that out and you'll learn all about the Brian Peck situation. But for me, I just didn't see where that was pertinent to what we were talking about today. The world of the Living Dead is so massive and wide, but I really do hope after talking about all of this that it's a little less convoluted. And I want to thank you for making it to the end of this video. If you haven't already, please like and share this video out to your friends. I work hard on these videos. And one major thing, if you haven't seen my last video right before this one about the major GoFundMe that I have going on, number one, I want to thank everybody who has already given to that GoFundMe, because we're already at 800, and I didn't even think that it's just, wow, thank you. We still have a long way to go, but just the fact that we're already there, it means a ton to me. And if you don't know what we're talking about, in the description of this video, there will be a link to that video and a link to my GoFundMe if you want to just drop $5, drop $20, drop $1,000, because boy, would I like that. But if not, again, make sure you like and that your notification bell is on so that way you always know when I drop new videos. Check out my social media so that way you and I could be friends. And if not, then I'll just see you guys on the next video. Peace, video creeps.
Let me share all my Patreon track. It goes Rebecca.